What's going on, guys? Evan the Dark Souls enthusiast here, bringing another Dark Souls 2 gameplay commentary. And we're going to cover a myriad of topics today. We're doing the Harvest Valley and the Covetous Demon in this upload. Sort of on the shorter side compared to some other ones. We're on the 30 minutes as opposed to the hour. I actually prefer this chunk of time because it's a little easier to keep talking without throwing my voice out, in a 30-minute commentary. But typically it takes me an hour or some to cover certain areas. So the length of the video just depends. But anyway, I'm going to quickly go over the topics we're going to be talking about today. As always, there will be a video timeline in the description, and that will allow you to link to relevant points in the video and things like that, call-outs and things of that nature. But we're going to do the usual channel updates here at the start. I'll talk some real-life stuff for a little bit, just because I haven't done any sort of like, this is what's going on in my real life in a while, so I want to give some real-life updates. We're going to talk about dexterity versus strength and sort of what I've noticed. There seems to be a lot of, seems to be a topic in the community that's heavily debated now, the dexterity versus strength. But it's not which is better, it's actually how much better is one than the other. So we'll get to that. Talk about some of the different weapons that I've observed people using in PvP, what I think is getting popular, what I think will be popular, and the weapons that I think are going to be the standouts of Dark Souls 2, providing we don't have any patches or anything like that, and some of the more compelling character builds I've seen. Depending on how much time we have left after that, I want to talk a little bit about weapon balance in general. I talked a little bit about that in the last video, and this time I want to actually take the time to finish out the conversation on that topic. But anyway, let me give you some real life updates. So there hasn't been an upload in a couple days, and I've been trying to do more frequent uploads. Now, it hasn't been that long, so I don't really feel that bad about it, but I kind of want to talk about the delay in the uploads, because sometimes the uploads don't just happen because I just don't feel like doing it, or I don't have anything to say, whatever. I would rather not upload than just put up some random stuff, randoms and stuff I don't even want to talk about, where I'm just basically creating filler content. I'm trying to avoid filler content as much as I can. This is like Dragon Ball Z Kai with better music, as opposed to, the original DBZ dub. I don't even know why I made that comparison, but I enjoy the Dragon Ball Z from time to time. Anyway, obviously DBZ abridged, the best DBZ. But our first timeline moment is coming up here at 3 minutes, and at the 3-minute mark, we're just going to see my character here on screen locate a Fragrant branch of Yore, which pretty substantial find. Fragrant branches of Yore allow you to unpetrify NPCs and monsters, and basically there's always probably a reward worth having every time you do it. I can only think of one petrified enemy you can Fragrant branch that might not be worth doing depending on the kind of character you're playing. So that's coming up here in the 3-minute mark, a little bit after that, and at the 4-minute mark we'll grab a fire seed. So that's the quick updates there. We won't revisit those, they're pretty self-explanatory. I'm drinking a little OJ, but back to my life updates for what was the cause of the latest delay on the commentary. So I am a hall director. That has been covered in some other commentaries before, but anyway, I am a hall director still. For those of you not familiar with the higher education system in the United States, that basically means that I live in a residence hall, or I live in a dormitory, if you prefer old school terminology, and I basically watch over the residents, provide services, make sure the building's in order, things like that. It's kind of a mix of an apartment manager, a teacher, and I guess a security guard on the. That's probably the smallest part of what I do, is the whole security thing. Safety is a big part of what I do, but security, not so much. There's been a lot of commentaries where I've talked about that. This channel started out as a resident assistant. I went to graduate school and became a graduate hall director, and I decided I really enjoyed the housing side of things, so I stayed in housing. I'm in my first full-time hall director job, and I am 25 years old, nearing 26. Not so in the near future, but not all that far away either. So as a result of that, I actually have a lot of advantages, because I live in a rent-controlled apartment. There is no rent. The school affords me this apartment for my services, and I make around $29,000 a year. Not that much. But with the benefits, pretty good. I have good insurance, things like that. All in all, definitely a pretty good life. I'd say if you factor in my benefits of my apartment, I'd probably make just over $40 a year. So with a master's degree, not so good, but not really in it for the money, at least not right now. We'll see how things progress as I get older. But anyway, what happened was, it's currently about 55, 60 outside, so pretty good weather. It's clear, a little windy. That's the kind of weather I like, low 60s, high 60s even, with a nice strong breeze. That's That's the kind of environment I like to live in, given the option, but not like I can pick any particular state in the continent of the United States and get that weather all the time. And I'm not really looking to live in the great California or the Florida, the fantastic weather states. I'm just sort of making an observation. When I get lucky and the weather shapes up the way I want it, that's the kind of weather I want. So, unfortunately, my apartment is actually located directly on top of the boiler. We are on water heat, not to be confused with steam heat as I often do, but basically the premise of water heat is they heat water and then they pipe water through a building. This is a form of heating very common in older buildings, and it's pretty good. It keeps things very warm, and the heat that comes off of the water is what heats your room, blows hot air out off of that water. It's pretty awesome. Very efficient, and on the flip side, it also can be used to heat the water in your showers. When you have a building of several hundred people, it can be hard for a traditional boiler to keep up with that water. So it's kind of how it works in a nutshell. I am not a sort of heating and plumbing specialist. I'm just kind of giving you my observations over time. So the good news is it keeps you very warm. The bad news is it makes you very hot. And because I live in a state where the temperature does not stay one way or the other, the weather's sort of bipolar in nature where, it's 55 today, but it could be 30 tomorrow. It might even snow. So, at any given time, the weather can change dramatically. So they usually don't turn off the water heat until much later in the year. Normally the students have all gone home and we're far into summer before they turn it off. So end of May is typically when we go to regular heating. It's also normally when the air conditioning comes on. So maybe in a little later. Basically, air conditioning gets turned on when one of the camps or conferences is influential enough that facilities decides to turn it on. So it's all cost-saving measures. I understand that. I do work for the university, so cost-saving measures, preventative measures like that, they are, initiatives I support. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid while I'm at this school, that's for certain. But anyway, we're at our next time limit here at 7 minutes, which was just lighting the bonfire in Harvest Valley. This will, of course, become as you explore and grab all the items in the area, this will become your mainstay. There's no other bonfire in this area for quite some time until after the boss. This is your sort of deepest bonfire you're going to reach. But anyway, because I'm right over the top of the boiler, my apartment is super hot all the time. As long as that heater is on, this apartment is roasting. I did a little experiment, a little Bill Nye the Science Guy kind of thing, where I took 2 dirty t-shirts, soaked them in water, put one on the floor in my bedroom, which is the furthest from the boiler, and put one in the living room, which is directly on top of the boiler. The t-shirt over top of the boiler was dried by my floor. Yes, if you touch my floor, it's heated. I basically have a heated floor because of the boiler directly under it, the heat exchange. Long story short, the t-shirt was clean almost immediately. Next timeline moment here is at 8:30, where you'll see me reach probably one of the better hidden items in the area, and maybe even of the game, depending on your perspective. But nothing back here is all that valuable, so much as I just want to show people how to get it. So basically, you want to stand in front of this wall, and you want to try to get these big dudes who throw the dark blast to break down this wall. What they have to do physically, and their physical attack is to swing their hand down to throw dark bolts. So it looks like he's not going to get closer, but he will. If you just kind of remain here and you dodge his attacks, eventually he will waddle close enough to knock down the wall. So that's the secret of getting those items. Nothing too amazing back there, but basically how it works. I recommend coming to this area as early as you can because there's 2 fragrant branches of Yore here, but you need to open up several other areas of the game, etc. So it also lets you get to straights if you need to go into some straights. I find that in most playthroughs I don't actually need any of straights items, but if I did, this is where I would go to get them. But like I said, so my apartment is super hot, so thus I run my air conditioner year-round. And one of my buddies recently talked to me like, why don't you relocate your computer close to your TV? Because the way I was doing gameplay commentary was I had my TV on my living room, and I had a desk set up in the back corner of the room where I was connecting my PVR to the computer, of course, because I have to record in that fashion. And I had my desktop in the back bedroom. Oops, took a hit there, but it doesn't matter. Still managed to knock the wall down. And so my buddy basically told me, why don't you take the laptop, put that away, and then move your main PC into the living room and make use of all your space. And I was like, okay. So I went ahead and did it. I packed the laptop up back in the laptop case for when I go moving to places, and then I moved my desktop and hooked into the PVR. And it worked great, for a while. But The downside was it was always so hot. I'd have to turn the air conditioner off if I wanted to record videos because it makes this awful buzzing noise. You know, it's a lot of background noise in the videos, and I already have background noise problems between open windows, heaters I don't control. And like I said, because I'm a hall director, I can't control my own internet, I can't control my own heating. There's a bunch of stuff that you lose control of. It's kind of like renting, basically. It's renting whereas normally you rent, you ask those kind of questions. You're becoming a hall director, you ask what your salary is, you don't really look at your apartment that heavily, which there's one mistake rookie hall directors make, which would be me, a rookie. But my apartment's fine, and my internet is awful, but you know, you make do with what you have. And I've had bad internet for the past 6 years, so for a guy that uses the internet so heavily, both for play and for work, I figured I would have gotten better internet by now, but I don't know. I guess not. And ultimately, because my apartment was so damn hot, and I was trying to do these gameplay commentaries, you know, I had to keep turning the air conditioner on and off, and none of that's all that exciting unto itself. But eventually, we ran into the big problem with the situation, which was I basically blew a circuit because I had, you know, the PC hooked up, the air conditioner hooked up, and I think I turned on the microwave, and I don't use the microwave much. So I turned on the microwave, and it finally just shorted the, didn't short anything, rather, but it, you know, popped the fuse, so I had to, you know, ask maintenance to flip the fuse back because I didn't know where the breaker box for my apartment was because it's not conveniently located in my apartment. And so maintenance actually had no idea where my breaker box was, and so I waited 2 days for someone to try to find the breaker box for this apartment. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you know, if you go to a college or university, keep in mind, if you're an employee living on the campus, you are the lowest priority. Students are actually the first priority. Students seem to think that because I'm a hall director, I get preferential treatment on the maintenance and stuff, but it's actually quite the opposite. Maintenance on my apartment doesn't get done until all the maintenance on the student apartments is caught up, or at least until they have spare personnel, rather until they have spare personnel to send over, because students always come first at the university, at least at all the universities I've worked. So, you know, basically, I had a working computer, but I didn't have anything else that was working. Because, well, I didn't even have a working computer at the time. I had nothing that worked because, you know, the PlayStation 3, the TV, all the recreation was basically in the living room. So with the living room fuse blown, I couldn't do anything. I also didn't have the air conditioner, so that room got, you know, 95, 98 degrees, and it was horrible. So I relocated my computer back to where it originally was, and I'm just going to have to figure some other way out of doing gameplay commentary. I don't want to do like a 200-foot Ethernet cable, or not Ethernet cable, excuse me, a 200-foot USB extender to connect my PVR to my PC. So I think we're going to go back to the laptop workstation model, which, to be frank, kind of sucks, but you know, you make do with what you have. And clutters my laptop's small hard drive, where it's just my laptop's just not really designed for that kind of work, but it's what I've got to do in the meantime, and I'm not really looking to move my computer back to where it was, so. At the 1630 will be our next timeline moment. We'll get a Fragrant branch of Yore 2 in this area. These guys guard some random loot. I like to sort of take the high ground here and space them out and force them to fight in narrow passages and things like that. This is actually not that hard to do pure melee. I mean, I think that magic makes this easy. I mean, in general, having some sort of ranged attack in Dark Souls 2 is always preferable. So if you're not going to invest in magic, which you probably should be, I think in this game hybrid builds are strictly better than pure builds. You know, that's just my opinion. I think a lot of testing goes to reflect that. But even if you're going to go for a pure no magic build, definitely, you know, don't rely on just pyromancy for your ranged attacks. I recommend carrying a bow at all times. It makes later areas in the game much easier if you have a ranged attack. You don't really need a ranged attack here, but it doesn't hurt. Of course, you get jumped by this little zombie dude. So, to bring sort of a simple story, a simple story that's become long to an end. So I had no power for most of my apartment, and I wound up relocating my PC, but I still had to wait 2 or 3 days for someone just to flip a switch on a breaker box, and it was super frustrating. So there hasn't been any uploads, just haven't been in a situation where I could actually do any uploads. And, you know, it's funny, when you don't want to do uploads, you don't really care about these kind of things, but when you want to do an upload, it's really frustrating, because you kind of get, like, at least for me, when I'm commenting, I get in a mood where I'm like, ah, man, I want to do a Dark Souls video right now, or I want to do this right now, and if I don't have the mood, the commentary just, I can tell is just really dry and kind of stale. And so, you can't do your commentary when you're motivated. It's frustrating to say the least. So, that's kind of my real life story, the struggles of a hall director. You know, boo-hoo me, right? First world problems. But, moving back into the realm of the channel updates, I'm going to knock those out real quick before we jump into the last 15 minutes or so for some gameplay discussion. views are still relatively low, you know, at a couple hundred a video. That's not at all discouraging to me, but I do hope that we can continue to grow the channel a little bit because, you know, the thing about uploading regularly is you're putting a lot more time in as if you upload irregularly. So, when I was uploading irregularly, I didn't really expect a lot of views because, well, frankly, I just wasn't uploading enough to keep people's attention or subscriptions. Whereas now I'm uploading a lot more, so I kind of feel like, you know, I'd like to get some viewership, and, you know, we're doing fine, you know, 200, 300 views a video, that's more than on par, you know, that's more than enough to keep me motivated. I just hope to see some growth. I mean, who wants to do something and not see any growth out of it? But, you know, the people that do watch have been really good about commenting and liking and things like that, so, you know, I have no tears or no complaints. I'm just sort of acknowledging that, you know, hopefully we can continue to grow the channel and have a bigger community. Then again, the smaller it is, the easier it is for me to respond to all the comments. But that's the channel updates in a nutshell, and from here I'm going to jump into the debate in Dark Souls 2 right now, which is the strength versus dexterity weapons. Basic consensus of most players, and this is, you know, I think mostly a PvE analysis, so maybe even PvP depending on who you ask, is that strength weapons are far, far better than dexterity weapons because they scale better. I mean, raising strength adds substantially more damage than raising dexterity does to your weapon. I mean, if two weapons have A, and this is the only way I've tested this, but if I have a weapon with A scaling in strength and A scaling in dexterity, every point in strength upgrades my damage, you know, 1 or 2 points, and it takes, you know, 2 points of dexterity to get 3 damage, something like that. Depends a little bit on the weapon, of course, and how strong that A scaling is, but overall, it's definitely true that strength increases damage more than dexterity, and is that fair? I don't know. I don't really see a problem with the weapon balance for PvE. I find the dexterity weapons to be, you know, competitive and useful. I mean, I have no problem with them. I think part of the problem is, I've talked about this in another video, so I won't belabor the point, but I think that players are a little too spoiled of the dexterity weapons of old. Players seem to believe that, you know, dexterity weapons should have the glory that they were in Dark Souls 1, and frankly, between the bleed damage and just the fast attack speed and the mobility and the range that katanas offered you in Dark Souls 1, it's pretty much undisputable that a katana was, you know, top 3 best weapons for PvP and maybe the best weapon class for, you know, PvE. In fact, definitely the best. And, you know, I think that as a result, these weapons that are perfectly fine just get a bad rap because people don't, you know, everyone sort of comes out of Dark Souls 1 into Dark Souls 2, and I think most players overall were using katanas in at least one character, if not multiple characters, and thus everyone came from the era of, you know, 40 dexterity, buff katanas, or, you know, lightning katanas, like, you know, all this bleed damage, and it just... Oops, that's my cell phone, guys. 1 sec. Sorry about that, guys. I had to take that call. That's sort of another privilege of being a hall director, is you get called when people do stupid shit. Pardon the French, but, you know, so basically that was a call concerning marijuana. Someone got busted smoking marijuana, so, you know, I'm sure this might spark a little thing on the, you know, 420 blaze it, legalization! You know, and I'm not interested in having that discussion. I'm just saying that, you know, I would not be shocked if, you know, that person got arrested for marijuana. It's just, so friendly tip, if you're in college or going to enroll in college, people get busted for marijuana more than you think. Both the stupid ones, you know, some people just make it so obvious it would be hard not to catch them. And on the other hand, some people are very cautious and harder to catch. But either way, all kinds get caught, and, you know, most schools will go ahead and press charges and things like that. So I'm not here to talk about the validity of those decisions on this part of the university, so much as I'm saying that, you know, please be aware of that. But anyway, that's not really there's really no place for that in this commentary. So jumping back on the actual gameplay that I was talking about, yes, players are just not accustomed to the new weapon balance, and I think in PvP, the most powerful weapons are actually, like, from what I've seen at least, it doesn't matter if they're strength or dex, it's all moveset determined, which, you know, is ultimately true in most Souls games. Once you get the fundamentals down, you know, moveset determines the viability of a weapon, in my opinion. Like, most players say the Lightning Claymore is very strong, and I have a Lightning Claymore on this character, and I enjoy it fine. It's fine in PvP, but the swing speed is slow enough that good players can roll all the way through it and start hitting you. And, you know, it's sort of an interesting point of conversation is certain weapons are good in PvP against anyone. certain weapons are good against bad players, as in they absolutely crush bad players, and certain weapons are just, you know, basically no weapon is really good against a good player. I mean, you know, if they're good, they're prepared for most weapons. And anyway, I think that, you know, katanas are fine in PvP. I mean, I see tons of PvP katanas, and I think the big problem with builds are when people do their balance equations is, and this is somewhat true of my Moonlight Greatsword, is the game is still so early, and we haven't really determined what's the strong weapons, and then what's the dull weapons, and what's the you know, unexciting, not useful. Like, the starting dagger will basically one-shot backstab any player. I mean, if they have 99 vitality, a fully upgraded dagger buffed, even someone who's not buffed, will one-shot most players. So, nothing else. There's always the great backstab equalizer. But come up here on, you know, the 21-minute mark, 21 minutes, 22 minutes, we will grab an Estus Flask shard, and that's, you know, big fun on any character. Until you maxed out your Estus Flask, these shards make, you know, a big difference. But, you know, that's coming up here soon, right up ahead, actually. So that's my thing on the whole strength versus dexterity. I think that in PvE, I think strength is a little stronger than dexterity in my experience. Not by much, though. I mean, both are very viable, and magic is probably better than both for PvE. For PvP, I think it's really to tell. I think they're balanced. I think the real imbalance actually comes from weapons that have, you know, the broken movesets. Like, C-tier Spear is likely, you know, probably a little OP in PvP, and Moonlight Greatsword might be a little OP just because the energy wave is super useful and more useful than players give it credit for. Of course, then again, the Thorned Greatsword doesn't seem to get the love that the Moonlight Greatsword does, and I find them to be, you know, somewhat similar. I mean, but you can make most weapons work. In my experience, though, in PvP, the slower the weapon, the harder it is to make it work, frankly. And I know some players, there's always the logic, I can get anything to work, and that's probably true. I mean, it is true that you can pick up any weapon in the game, and you can make it work in PvP. It's just the ease and, you know, how effective it will be overall as measured against other weapons. I mean, you have to work really hard to make certain weapons work, both in build and, you know, in style. So, like, Dark Souls 1 examples are more known to me right now. So if you take, like, Havel's weapon, the Dragon's Tooth, people made that work in PvP. It's extremely heavy, extremely slow, and frankly it does more damage than you'd really ever need to. But people made it work. You know, they'd rock, you know, the all-naked build with that, and they'd use a talisman, and they use shockwaves to stun players and backstab them for a Dragon Tooth instant kill. Probably could have done that with a rapier in most instances, or, you know, could have done it with any heavy weapon. It didn't have to be this outrageous Dragon's Tooth, but yeah, that's what people like to do, and that's what they did. So definitely, you know, never assume that I'm saying any weapon is unviable. I'm just saying that certain weapons are way more viable than others. I've noticed a lot of players are using sort of like their pet weapon. A lot of players like whips, and whips typically aren't that effective. And, you know, one player was playing against, he was using this whip just to get the poison status on somebody. Then once they were poisoned, he'd switch over to his main weapon, or he'd dual wield, things like that. Right now, I'd say my top picks for, you know, tier 1 weapons, if you're wondering, this is all very tentative, but Moonlight Greatsword, if you know how to use it, I guess that's true of all weapons, but the Moonlight Greatsword will take a little bit of practice, I think, more than people assume it will. Moonlight Greatsword is great, Ruler Sword is great, Thorned Greatsword is great, all the katanas are great, although I think the Blacksteel Katana's moveset leaves a little bit to be desired. You know, those are all great weapons. If you're a backstab guy, backstab magic guy, then Dagger is amazing. You know, weighs nothing, does all the instant kill backstabs. So, Mace is amazing. Although I think people are catching on to the Mace. The Mace is a very predictable moveset, so once people get comfortable, they can handle the Mace. Weapons that have good running attacks, I found are always great in PvP. You want to have something that has good reach. Which is why the Claymore Sword gets honorable mention, because its R2 has a lot of reach. So, you know, it's just really too early to say which weapons are going to be the best, I think. And there never will be a definitive decision on what's the best. But keep in mind, the strength of most weapons is going to be defined by the buffs you put on them. So that's my big thing is, you know, if you don't want to be buffing your weapon, you know, plan accordingly to either gimp your character or to use a very specific weapon that can't be buffed, you know. Like, My recommend is if you're just a player who just hates buffing weapons, you never want to buff your weapon. I kind of like I would use the Defender's Greatsword. Phenomenal weapon, tons and tons of lightning damage, and there's those what I call idiot jumps. Creators of Dark Souls deciding that they randomly want to put these precision jumping into a game that has lousy jumping controls. But anyway, we'll jump back here into the Harvest Valley. This is actually the Sunlight Covent. Praise the sun. I will join here, and then we won't see it on camera, but I actually did 30 co-ops to get all my Sunlight medals to get the Great Lightning Spear. Or, sorry, not Great Sunlight Spear. Legacy of Gwyn, guys. So, Sunlight Spear is fantastic in this game. Your character throws it much faster than Dark Souls 1. The damage is still extreme, and often one-shots in PvP. If it doesn't one-shot, it hits someone hard enough that they're going to be running away from you. So, that's a thought. So we're quickly approaching the end of this commentary, a couple minutes before the Covetous Demon. I don't tend to talk during the boss fight, as is my custom, so I do want to hit on a couple things in sort of the last 4 minutes we have before the end. I like to say a lot of weapons people aren't considering or haven't tested much are absolutely amazing. The Lance, Grand Lance in particular, is pretty much fantastic in PvP. If you dual wield and you can land a hit stun on somebody, if they don't roll out or you can get them in a stagger, the R2, which is basically a running charge, like a traditional lance, like you just charge forward lancing them over and over, does a ton of damage and is great. Another thing I'd like to advise players to stay away from, despite how much I like the builds, is I would avoid quality builds like the Plague. I've talked about this before, but quality builds are 40 strength, 40 dexterity, or something close to it, 30 and 30. Basically builds that split strength and dexterity evenly. I would avoid those because my testing so far, a lance, for example, I tested this with the Grand Lance. A Grand Lance of 40 strength and 40 dexterity does about the same damage as a character with minimal stats and the minimal stats to wield the lance, coupled with one weapon buff. So definitely seems to be one of those games where your buffs are going to define your classes, not so much your stats. Also, some other testing has shown that unless you are truly a pure mage, it might be worthwhile to just avoid attunement entirely. A ring exists which adds 4 attunement for 1 slot, which basically covers all your attunement needs for most hybrid builds. So unless you're going to pure caster, you can keep attunement really low if you want to. Now it all depends. Like I said, Dark Souls 2, your builds are going to be defined basically by the rings you wear. So if you want to free up a ring slot, you might be dumping some points into attunement. Although it's all pretty much theoretical until we actually unlock, or rather, excuse me, it's all pointless and theoretical until FromSoft either patches out soul memory or says it's here to stay forever. And if it's, frankly, I just want to throw this out there, guys. If soul memory is here to stay forever, Dark Souls 2 is not going to get a lot of love from me. I think that will ruin the game for me, essentially, if they don't improve it. I'll wind up doing some PvE runs and put them on YouTube, and then I'll be done, because I'm not going to PvP, in brackets of level 300 plus, because that's stupid. I don't get any enjoyment out of that. So, I almost get killed by these mannequins here. Between the bleed damage and their long combos, they're actually a pretty damaging enemy, and I've died to them on a number of occasions, basically because I underestimate them from the get-go. I know we said we're going to talk more about like Satyr Spear and some other weapons at the start of the video, and I said I want to talk about some of my patch streams and weapon balance, and we talked about some of those a little bit, and I think I've elaborated just a little bit more on why weapon balance in this game is way off. But in case the point isn't clear enough, let me just put it succinctly in this last minute. The builds that do the most damage use weapon buffs coupled with the minimum stats to wield a weapon. So if your weapon scales on strength and dexterity, instead of raising strength and dexterity to 20 each or 40 each, you're just going to get 12 and 12, which is maybe the minimum to wield the weapon. And then you put the rest of your points into faith or intelligence to get crystal magic weapon or something like that. And if you're not interested in weapons at all, of course, you could always just get flame weapon with pyromancy. But even if you're going to do the flame weapon route, the damage difference is so low that it's typically silly to wind up investing a lot of points into strength and dexterity to raise damage. So that's how the developers balanced weapons this time. By balance, I mean crapped all over the balance. So it's something to watch out for. If you're looking to use resins and stuff, there's no magic for me, no pyromancy, that's fine too, but still, pump the points to dexterity is something valuable. So, I will talk to you guys after the boss battle. Alright guys, that's the end of the Covetous Demon. I'd like to thank everyone for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see everyone next time.